The loss of rank by general officers, 4-star generals, could generate a major impact on the relationship between the military and the Brazilian judiciary.
Throughout the entire process regarding the coup attempt, the military did not interfere, allowed the judiciary to act, and accepted all the punishments. And they are preparing to judge the military in the Superior Military Court for loss of rank. It is a very serious decision. And now Supreme Court justices are implicated in illegal acts, or at least facing allegations. And how are you going to explain that a court with justices who are facing public opposition can judge the military who were involved in the January 8th events?
A specific group of armed forces military personnel has been strongly pressuring against the loss of rank for the generals convicted for the events of January 8th.
That is, for this group.
There's no way to accept severe punishments for the military without Supreme Federal Court justices involved in the Banco Master scandals also being held accountable for their actions. The main argument is that justice cannot be selective if generals can be expelled due to conduct deemed incompatible with democratic principles. So, justices who appear in corruption and favoritism investigations should also be judged and, at the very least, removed from their positions. This perception has fueled a climate of dissatisfaction in the barracks and could escalate into an unprecedented crisis. Welcome to Vida no Quartel. With the real possibility of general officers being expelled and returning to civilian life, the pressure for equality in punishments is growing within the armed forces. Many service members argue that it doesn't make sense to strip generals of their ranks. Meanwhile, Supreme Federal Court justices are mentioned in corruption and favoritism investigations without facing any consequences. In the case of Minister Dias Toffoli, the federal police found mentions of his name on the cell phone of Daniel Vorcaro, owner of Banco Master. Because of this, Toffoli stepped down from overseeing investigations involving the bank, which raised suspicions about his impartiality. Reports also indicated that funds linked to Vorcaro bought a stake in a company that had Toffoli and his brothers as partners, which was focused on a luxury resort where the minister frequently stayed. In addition, investigations indicated that Toffoli used a private jet linked to lawyers for master executives and made decisions on his own initiative that directly benefited the bank. These episodes consolidated the narrative that there was a relationship of convenience between the minister and the group under investigation, increasing the perception of undue closeness.
Today, a report from the newspaper O Globo revealed that the Supreme Court paid daily allowances for security personnel to support court officials.
The contract signed with the institution was estimated at 129 million reais, an amount considered disproportionate and suspicious. The investigations also mentioned meetings with the central bank and messages exchanged between Vorcaro and Moraes, reinforcing the idea of political and legal influence in favor of the bank. For a large group of high-ranking military officers, the contrast is striking. For generals, the punishment is the loss of their ranks, while ministers involved in scandals remain untouched in their positions. This perception of imbalance fuels dissatisfaction and strengthens resistance against selective punishments, making it clear that either the Supreme Court sets an example and makes sacrifices itself, or it will be difficult for people to accept the expulsion of the convicted generals. In recent decades, politicization in the barracks has become a recurring practice. Several presidents have tried to use the armed forces as instruments of government instead of state institutions, attempting to bring the military hierarchy closer to their political projects. Despite this, the military have largely remained distant from direct pressures, even in the face of questionable decisions by the federal Supreme Court, from the numerous corruption scandals in politics and the exponential growth of violence in Brazil. Now, though, the scenario has changed completely. Realizing that they could permanently lose their influence within the country, a military faction from the three armed services began to internally pressure both the Supreme Court and the President of the Republic. The message is clear. Either Brazil takes a firm direction and punishes everyone without exception, or things could escalate among the branches of power, opening the door to a major institutional crisis. It is worth noting that recently, the Superior Military Court honored members of the Workers' Party for allegedly good services rendered to the military justice system, which sparked heated debates in society. Many question what relevant services were actually performed, and the prevailing perception is that the tribute conveys a sense of partiality in the decisions. This episode, combined with the close relationships between authorities from different branches of government, reinforces the narrative of institutional politicization and increases distrust regarding the impartiality of the military justice system, fueling criticism that such honors reflect more political alignment than technical merit. With the possibility of general officers losing their ranks, the issue has gained traction within the armed forces. Generals, four-star generals like Braga Neto and Augusto Heleno, even in retirement, still maintain good relationships with active duty officers, which could influence the decision so that the loss of ranks is not accepted. If the Superior Military Court decides on expulsion, it sets a dangerous precedent. Other generals could be tried in the future for political involvement. In a scenario of growing polarization, this deadlock reveals an institutional crisis in the making. If there are no measures that convey balance and justice, the relationship between the federal Supreme Court and the military could deteriorate even further, putting political stability at risk. The public remains distant from the real needs of the population, while the country stays focused on power struggles, accusations of corruption, and superficial political fights. Brazil needs to wake up. Honesty is not a merit, it's a moral obligation. And while political fanatics argue about who is more honest, corruption continues to operate behind the scenes, sustaining the privileges of politicians and members of the judiciary at the expense of society. Leave your thoughts about all this in the comments below. And do the generals really risk losing their ranks? Here at Vida No Quartel, you stay up to date with everything happening in the military world. Leave a like, subscribe, and watch one of the videos appearing on your screen. Onward, fighters. See you next time.